Another modern myth is that edumacation or education equals intelligence. This is a classic modern myth. This is why they say edumacation can eradicate all human disparities. That is, if you, through learning, through the education system, which has become in modern times a propaganda institution, through education you can equalize humanity, make them come to parity. That is, you can erase thousands of years of natural selection because you can train a fucking monkey to use a fork or to do menial work or to recite collective conventional behaviors. That is through imitation. That is, if you can train somebody to imitate what a quote unquote normal human being is supposed to behave as, then you've achieved equalization. This is why everything becomes mediocre, because in order to deal with the discrepancy between high and low IQ, you seek for the median, the lowest common denominator, something every chimpanzee and orangutan out there can perform and pretend to be a civilized human being. Now, many moderns, the midwits, let's say, they know that there's a difference between knowledge and understanding, because a computer has infinitely more knowledge than a human being can ever have, and can repeat it in a millisecond, and yet it is the dumbest machine out there. They know this, and yet they always fall for the trap of equating education for intelligence. That is, if they manage to recite the dates, the names involved in an event, they think they're achieving some great intellectual feat, that they're proving to be right, rather than simply repeating the official narratives. And this is where they prove to be most dependent on the official narrative, because what does the official narrative provide for them? Not only the dates and the names through edumacation, but also what they mean. That is, they provide for them an understanding, because they are completely and totally reliant on official sources to provide them with an understanding. So they know all this data, they have all this knowledge, but they don't know what it means unless the official sources tells them what it means. They need an official source to explain to them what all this data they have in their fucking empty heads, echoing in their fucking skulls, what it all means. And what do I mean by means? This is where the nihilism has corrupted the meaning of words, including the meaning of meaning. What does meaning mean? It means how things interrelate, interconnect. That's what it means. So you can have data, but how do they interrelate and interconnect? What's the relationship? And this is what I mean by meaning. And they have no capacity to make these connections unless somebody, some official expert, quote unquote, tells them how they connect and what it means. And of course, this memorization can be performed by a median IQ, an average IQ. Doesn't require much intelligence. So this is where the lefties, well, the moderns, and by moderns I mean American people born and raised under the American dogma. They are the quintessential moderns of our time. This is what they believe, because this is what they were told to believe. That simply by knowing things, that you know the truth. And by truth I mean what is most probably the case. Probability, not certainty. Probability. And this is proven by a theory's adherence to the experience world and its ability to make predictions. This is where understanding comes into play as an advantage. It takes data and it finds a common thread. That's why I say knowledge is data, knowledge is patterns, and understanding is the underlying patterns of these patterns. And if you know this underlying, if you can perceive this underlying pattern that governs these perceived patterns, then you can make predictions. And this is why IQ is not measured by knowledge, how much, they don't give you a test testing how much you know, how well you've memorized information. They give you tests on how you can apply this information. If you can find a pattern, that's what IQ is, a pattern recognition. It's not data recitation out of memory. That's like even average IQ can accomplish this over time. Even chimpanzees can be trained to perform this task of data recitation. And to perceive patterns, you don't need a lot of knowledge of the past, because, as I've said before, the past is constantly manifesting as present. That is, all you must do is interpret what is present. From the present, you can extrapolate the past, because the past, like I said, manifests the present and is interpreted as appearance, the apparent, or as the Greeks call it, phenomenon, the phenomenon. Every apparent, every phenomenon carries with it the past that determined it to be present. And this is why you can just evaluate, you can measure an individual just from his appearance. And by appearance, I'm not only talking about his looks, his the visual data, but his performance, the way he speaks, the way he moves, even the way he smells, the way every sense organ perceives the apparent within its own context. But of course, for predatory species like our own, or higher species, the visual is very important. So for us, the visual is primary. So when we say appearance, we immediately think of how things look, which is a very important aspect of the apparent, but it's not the only aspect. And this is why human beings conceal their appearance, or they try to change their appearance, because it is a living documentation of their entire past. So you don't need to know their history, the data of their history, because it's manifest in their presence. How they behave, how they speak, how they look at you, how they react to you, how they sound, how they smell, how they feel. All that data is in their presence. And understanding is finding the correct connections. That's why everybody can perceive the same thing, and yet some are so stupid they don't understand anything. They see things superficially. Somebody has to tell them what it means. Whereas others can make evaluations on their own. They may be helped from other sources, maybe from second-hand sources, but they rely primarily on their own judgments. Whereas these moderns have been so dumbed down over the decades that they are completely dependent on authorities, the official narratives. And if you give them something that's contrary to this official narrative, they will demand sources again. So in order to contradict their sources, they need other superior sources. This is how dependent on external agencies, external authorities they've become. This is how dumbed down they've become. They cannot utter a single judgment without using an authority. And this is exactly what is happening in the United States presently. Because the American people have been so dumbed down over decades and decades of their legacy media and their Hollywood masters feeding them all this bullshit, dumbing them down, making them more dependent. You know, these the land of the free and the brave, well, they're the land of the most dependent people on the planet at the moment. They cannot think of anything without somebody telling them what it means. They need an authority to tell them what it means. Otherwise, they cannot pass a judgment. They know all the dates. They know what happened in the past. They can tell you all the names. They can recite them from memory. And it's very impressive. But what it means, they cannot tell you unless they refer or defer to a authority, an expert that told them what it means. And this is what I call institutionalization. They've been institutionalized. You don't need to be in prison to be institutionalized. You can be surrounded by computers and television sets all your life and you can be institutionalized. That means you cannot do anything, think of anything if it is not told to you. Even the events and the dates and the names they recite, they've been told to them. Of course, you can't do without these mediators because you don't have access to these events in the past. But then what these dates and events and actors that participated and made these events possible, how the meaning, how they did it, why they did it, that is how it's all interconnected. They have no ability to tell you. They just can tell you that, the names, the dates, what happened before, what happened after. Like a computer can tell you all these things, but it can't explain to you why it happened or what was underlying it. What was the connection to other events? So to put it within causality, they can tell you all the causes, the events, but they can't explain to you how all this led to the effect. And that's why they recite, they repeat whatever they are told. So they become parrots that parrot information without any understanding of their own. And this is why AI will prove to be another source of dumbing down of mankind.